Why was the most treated generation also the most miserable?
Right.
Why did they have so many mental health problems and diagnoses? And um, you asked, how did I get started with this? And it really began with, I really just wanted to know what was going on. These should have been the most robust, right?
Right.
They'd had the most wellness,
Right.
the most therapy. And instead we were seeing the reverse.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the City Journal podcast. I am your host, Rafael Mangual, and today is a very special day because we are joined by my brilliant colleague, Abigail Shrier. Abigail, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited to be talking to you today because I'm a massive fan of your work, and I think your background is super fascinating. I don't think a lot of people know this about you, but you're a lawyer by training.
I am.
So, walk us through that, right? Yale law, federal judicial clerkship. How'd you end up as a public intellectual in the think tank world?
Well, I left the law firm I was working at when I started to have kids in 2010 for a few years. And actually, when the kids were little, I wasn't working for a number of years. I was writing fiction, actually, a bunch of unpublishable novels. And then I started to get back into journalism, and I hadn't done journalism for a bunch of years,
Yeah.
but I got back into it. And one of my pieces I wrote for the local Jewish press, and one of my pieces a Wall Street Journal editor saw, and she reached out to me and said, "You should submit to us." And then in 2018, I published, I think it was 12 or 13 op-eds in the space of a year for the Wall Street Journal.
Wow.
So right away, they liked everything I was doing. And one of those pieces became a story that turned into my first book, Irreversible Damage.
Awesome. It's an incredible story. I've been reading you since you've been writing for the Wall Street Journal. So, this is an incredible privilege for me. Um, you know, Going from the Wall Street Journal and the journalism world into the think tank space is different. I'm always curious about how people view the differences, right? What made you want to make the transition into a policy think tank like the Manhattan Institute, and why the Manhattan Institute out of, all your choices?
Well, growing up, a lot of my heroes worked here.
Same for me. Yeah.
Kay Heimowitz,
Oh my
Theodore
God.
Dalrymple.
Kay Heimowitz was the very first person I ever read
Yeah, really?
at City Journal. It was like a piece on manning up
Right.
that she wrote in the early 2000s. And I was like,
Right.
oh, this lady knows what she's talking about.
Exactly. I think I used to read in commentary as well.
Yeah.
These were a lot of my heroes. Um, and then, I'll tell you, I have a slightly different role than other people
Sure.
at the Institute as a journalist. And that is, I sort of go into areas first. I sort of go into the cave first with a
Yeah.
torch, and I find the problem areas, and then other people come in behind
Yeah.
me and then try to fix the policy. But that first step of going in and doing the investigation and finding out what's going on, that's my favorite part. And getting able to do that at Manhattan Institute has really been a dream. It's been wonderful, and I get to work with the most incredible colleagues like you
Oh, thank you.
and Chris Rufo and Heather McDonald, who I've been reading for
Yeah.
years,
Same.
and Jason Riley. So it's really been absolutely wonderful.
It's an amazing place, and it's significantly better off now that you're here. So we're very happy about the work that you do. So one of the most recent issues that you've investigated is through your book Bad Therapy, which I want to get into. But before that, one of the other things that's on your resume that I think is just also super fascinating is you are an advice columnist.
Yeah.
And I'm a fan of your advice column. I've never read an advice column at any point in my life before, but I read almost everything that you write for the Free Press in that space. And I'm just always curious to sort of get takes of people who do that kind of work. I feel like you have probably a particularly accurate vantage point of where society's at.
Yeah.
Through that work. Is there a sort of a common thread that you see?
Sure. There is a common thread. And what I try to provide people is a moral framework, not the sort of supercilious framework that we're all used to getting from advice columnists, but
Yeah.
an accurate one. And I think that, um, you know, I love it. I really have enjoyed this. Barry asked me to do it, and it's great, a great joy. But I'll tell you sort of why I started it, and that was that when I first wrote Irreversible Damage, I wrote it in 2019. It was published in June of 2020.
Yeah.
And the first editor I was ever assigned, I went to meet him for the first time at my then publisher, and he said to me, he said, "To be honest, this book, I know it's a book about kids transitioning, young girls transitioning, changing their bodies. The truth is, I would never read a book like this. I don't think. I mean, the whole topic is yuck."
Mm,
And that stuck with me all these years today because he's a wonderful man, he's a brilliant man, but I kept thinking, we have this problem
yeah,
because good people think this is yuck. And I think tax policy is incredibly important.
sure.
I think legislation's important, but I also think the moral dilemmas that this country is facing are
Yes.
critical. And the things that the people care most about, those are the things we should be addressing too. And there's no shame in it. In
Right.
fact, it's a real responsibility we have. And so from the time, I went in and looked, at the teen trans phenomenon and
Yeah.
why all these young girls were transitioning, and exposing the social contagion of it, that has really been a passion of mine, is trying to meet Americans where they are
Right.
and shed light on the problems that are most critical to their lives.
It's such an important insight because, I find it in my work too. One of the other topics that I write about besides crime is child welfare policy. And I often find that it's very hard to sort of get people to engage with some of the stories that I cover. And I think a big part of it is this sort of disgust factor. No one wants to think about,
That's right.
a 4-year-old boy being starved to death, as just happened last year in East Harlem. No one wants to think about, a 2-year-old beaten to death by, their own parent. Um, how do you get through something like that? How do you overcome that instinct that people have to sort of pull away from the things that make them uncomfortable?
It's so interesting. When I was writing Irreversible Damage, it was very hard because I was talking to hundreds and hundreds of parents, and no one would listen to their stories.
Yeah.
And they were telling me they were predominantly liberal. These were not religious people. They were secular, liberal. That's really who the trans phenomenon hit the hardest
Right.
with these young girls, because all of their teachers were in agreement. All of their therapists were in agreement.
Right.
They didn't have any counterweight at all. And when they went online, they couldn't find anything. They literally couldn't find, before Irreversible Damage, there was no place to look to
Right.
get another side of the story, of the medical story of what they were doing to their kids. Every therapist, not only therapist, every therapy organization, the
Right.
American Psychiatric Association, American Psychological Association, was saying, affirm the kid, affirm, affirm,
Right.
affirm gender identity. You must go through a transition.
Right.
So parents were reaching out. Hundreds of parents. Once I wrote the piece for the Wall Street Journal, then there was a response to it in the New York Times, and that author, Jenny Boylan, got hundreds of responses to her column attacking mine, and Jenny Boylan's commenters were mostly on my side. So
Interesting.
that's when I knew I had a book.
Right.
And I was talking to hundreds of parents, and they were saying to me, they were coming to me and they were saying, "What do I do?"
Right.
And almost all of them cried on the phone. They would sob. And it was very hard because I would say to them, "Look, I'm just a journalist.
Right.
I
Right.
can expose what's going on. I can talk to all the experts, but it's very
Right.
hard for me to tell you what to do."
Right.
Um, and that became a theme, which was just, I really decided, here's what's going to be my job. My job is to expose it. And then the people who want to come in after and
Right.
figure out what policy needs to change, what healthcare needs to change, I'll leave that to them.
Right.
So I didn't go around. I was invited to testify in all the trials that have come after, and
Yeah.
many of them.
Yeah.
And I didn't go around testifying. I just moved on to the next topic. And that's generally what I do as a journalist. I try to go in, do the investigative work, expose it as rigorously as I possibly can, and then move on to the next problem.
I mean, I think that's admirable. It takes discipline as well. And, I think it's important for public intellectuals who do that kind of work to understand their own limits, which I don't think is always the case, right? I mean, I think sometimes people get into an issue and then they want to become, the sort of foremost expert, even in the areas in which they don't have training to really address it. So, again, just, incredibly appreciative of how you go about the work that you do. So after that book, you wrote Bad Therapy, which I read cover to cover and was just fascinated by. I always say that if I could go back to school and do it again, I would have studied psychology. It's just a fascinating topic to me. But I want to just give our listeners a sense of your argument in that book, because I think we live in a time in which therapy is sort of regarded as something between a luxury and a necessity, right? Like everyone who has the money should, of course, be in therapy, right? I mean, it's an unalloyed good. Um, do it. And I think you make a very interesting argument, which is you suggest that, you know, there is a subset of the population for whom therapy is not just unnecessary, but a net negative likely. How do you take us through that?
Sure. So every book I write, I start with a question. My question with bad therapy was, why was the generation that received the most mental health treatment?
Mm.
Over 40% of them had been in therapy. Over 42 of them percent of them had
40%.
been in therapy. Over 42% had a mental health diagnosis. Why was the most treated generation also the most miserable?
Right.
Why did they have so many mental health problems and diagnoses? And um, you asked, how did I get started with this? And it really began with, I really just wanted to know what was going on. These should have been the most robust, right?
Right.
They'd had the most wellness,
Right.
the most therapy. And instead we were seeing the reverse. And one of the things I explored in the book is the idea of iatrogenesis.
Hmm.
And the idea of iatrogenesis is that a healer can harm.
Sure.
We've known this is a very old concept,
Yes.
right? And what is bad therapy? Bad therapy is unnecessary therapy that introduces new symptoms or makes existing symptoms worse.
Right.
And the problem is that by definition, every single intervention, if it is efficacious, if it has the potential or the power to help,
Right.
it can by definition also harm, right? A
Right.
trip to the ER. Now, if you need if you need to get stitches,
Sure.
then the risk of picking up
Right.
MRSA or another infection,
Right.
it's worth the
It's worth
risk.
the risk.
You're bleeding. But if you're not bleeding, we don't give you x-rays. You don't hang out in the ER.
Right.
Why? Because you can always pick up,
Right.
right? Something that's in the ER.
Right.
The same thing as therapy. The same thing with therapy. Therapy can be efficacious. Of course it can. And sometimes it's necessary. We
Right.
need it to stabilize really unstable kids who are suffering with anorexia, with severe OCD, with all kinds of problems.
Yeah.
The problem is it's become a prophylactic.
Mm.
Parents were using it for everything. The
Right.
death of a cat, I was told. And it's going to be a hard transition for her to middle school. Just in case, I'm going to set her up with a therapist.
Right.
And the problem is what was happening was that it was introducing problems. All of a sudden, every minor deviation from a norm was getting diagnosed.
Right.
And the problem is when you hand a diagnosis to an adolescent, so you hand a diagnosis to an adult, and I was told this by adults. I had a therapist who said I might have PTSD from my childhood. I'm not sure that's right.
Right. Right.
But you hand a diagnosis to a child, to an adolescent, and you forever change that child's view of himself or
Mm.
herself. And that's what we were seeing. We were seeing kids handed a limitation and
Right.
told there's something wrong with you and only science can fix you.
Right.
It's out of your control now. That's a devastating thing to tell a child, especially when it's unnecessary.
Yeah, and it also sort of becomes part of their identity, right? I mean, and I think that's actually particularly problematic in the time that we live in now, where everyone seems to sort of be vying for position in the oppression Olympics to some degree or another, right? Like having a diagnosis, if you are a well-to-do, white male or female, upper middle class or wealthy family, you have privilege that you have to check, right? You're going to be seen as problematic in a lot of the spaces that, you want to be accepted in. The second you get a diagnosis, you now have something that sort of puts you on this victim totem pole somewhere.
That's right.
And I think that's probably problematic.
It's hugely problematic because it becomes permanent.
Right.
A permanent limitation. You're defined by it. Remember, if you think of yourself as shy or lazy, we all know those are things you can overcome.
Right.
You might never naturally be an extrovert if you're shy, but you think, I can fight this. I'm a
Right.
little shy, but I can work through it. The problem is if you're told you have ADHD, now you know you need a stimulant.
Right.
That's the only thing that can help. You have an official medical problem.
Right.
That's a very different thing to tell a child. And if it's not necessary, if you can work around it, that's much better than
Right.
handing a kid a limitation and
Right.
telling them, no, there's something wrong with your brain.
Right. Right. Yeah, I'm very interested in this idea of, the sort of iatrogenic effect of therapy, because we see this in criminology as well. Actually, there's a paper I just read, a preprint that's fascinating. It's about the iatrogenic effect of criminal justice reform. So people who get released early have a higher risk then of being killed by police
Wow.
because they're still in the midst of a criminal career, of an active criminal pattern that they will then repeat when they get released and they come into contact
Wow.
with police and they end up being on the receiving side of a
Yeah.
use of force. And they were able to sort of empirically show this, that actually for some people, the early release actually puts them directly in harm's way. We see this all the time with, other categories of offenders who, are targets themselves from other gang members and they get released and they're back out on the street. But I think not enough people, especially in the policy world, really consider the fact that even something that is meant to be helpful and that can be definitionally helpful also has the potential to put people in positions where they're going to face new harms that might actually overwhelm the potential benefits.
Yeah, there's two things we've done with kids in the last generation. We haven't given them the good things that they need in a healthy life,
Mm,
and we've introduced all kinds of harm in the form of gender ideology, in the form of unnecessary therapy and unnecessary diagnosis. Of course, unnecessary medications as well. We have
yeah,
little kids being put on SSRIs left and right.
right.
And the thing to know is, what do kids need? We actually have great research on this. They need three things. They need parental authority,
Hmm.
they need relational stability, people who love them over a lifetime, not hired people who
Right,
are paid to love them or the perfect
right,
expert, people who actually love them
right, right,
over a lifetime. And they need independence. They need to be able to do stuff on their own without
right.
the constant monitoring. We have withdrawn all three.
Yeah,
And so the kids are suffering more. The problem is what we're pouring in to fix them is not making things better. And
right.
that's mental health, therapy and intervention. It's not helping. It's pouring it into an unhealthy life.
I think that's right. It's almost as if we're sort of over medicalizing the everyday experiences and emotions of kids, right? Like a kid's anxious, a kid's sad, a kid's, unhappy or frustrated. And we have to put a label on this and we have to treat it as if it's not a part of normal life. And it sort of puts people into this pattern. Which I think is dangerous. I mean, do you see that as part of the problem? Because I mean, I think about my own life, right? I'm turning 40 this year, which I'm having a hard time with.
Nice.
And probably the first 3 decades of my life, I could count on one hand the people that I had met who had ever been to therapy at any point in their life. And in the last 10 years, I think I've lost count of all the people I know who have been in and out of therapy,
Okay.
some of them for, decades. And it can't be the case that at a national level, our mental health has just fallen off a cliff, can it? Or, is there something cultural about this where we're kind of over medicalizing a lot of just normal life?
So I think both things are true. I think we're leading more unhealthy lives, lives that make us more atomized and sad.
Mm,
And we're over medicalizing problems. So people will now say, and you hear this, oh, that's my trauma.
right.
I
Yes.
can't go by my
As if
old
it,
middle school
as if it
as
belongs to
as
you.
it
Like it's
belongs to
a,
our treatment of soldiers, combat veterans who've
right,
been through PTSD has this problem. When you spell out the symptoms of PTSD to soldiers, and we've done this
right,
in in America, when you give them the symptoms, you tell them to look for it
right,
effectively.
right,
All of a sudden, lo and behold, they decide they have PTSD. They
right,
effectively talk themselves into it in much higher numbers, and they've tested this. Much higher numbers of people identify as having had PTSD than even saw combat. So we know that some percentage of those who believe they have
right.
PTSD have no real reason,
Yeah,
or at least the reasons they're coming up with don't make very much sense.
right,
But if, we know this, and Paul McHugh, the wonderful psychiatrist, is the one who did the work and explained this to me. And that is that, in other countries, in Israel, they don't treat soldiers who have been through a traumatic incident the same way. What they do is, if they see their combat colleagues, hurt or killed,
right,
they take them out of the war, out of combat for some period of time. They go
right.
home to rest for a few weeks, then they come right back and rejoin the troops. They rejoin their men.
Wow.
They don't. What do we do in America? We take them out.
Right,
We sit them with a therapist. We say, your country did this to you.
right,
You have been injured. You now have a brain problem. And lo and behold, they never come off disability.
right. Right. Yeah, no, I mean, It's actually a big problem that more and more people are talking about, the degree to which people who separate from the military are finding themselves on permanent disability for all manner of things, even though, in a lot of cases, they're perfectly fine. I'm really interested in something that you said about, when you're talking about what kids need to sort of lead a healthy life. One of the first things that you said was, sort of parental authority, which implies like some degree of structure, which I think is just both one of those things that's obvious, but one of those things that we miss all the time, right? Like everyone feels like it's nice to give kids choices, but choices are incredibly overwhelming. Right? Like I
Yeah.
see this if I'm scrolling Netflix, sometimes like I have 10,000 choices of what I almost missed the days when we didn't have cable and we had four channels that we could, spin the dial through. And it was like, all right, well, this is what's on at this time and this is what I'm going to watch. I'm going to be happy. And I feel like I was happier with it. I think the same thing goes for kids. I mean, when they don't have structure, there's this sort of unlimited world of choices before them, and that's actually anxiety inducing, because how do you make the right
That's right.
choice about which step to take when you have seemingly infinite ones?
There's wonderful psychological research on this. It goes back to the 1960s by Diana Baumerind.
Mm,
She's a wonderful psychologist. And one of the things she found was that authoritative parenting, that's rule-based but
right,
loving parenting. So not harsh and authoritarian and unloving,
right,
but rule-based and loving parenting produced reliably the best results in terms of happiness, in terms of mental health, and in terms of success in life, and even their relationship with their parents.
yeah,
And I looked at this in bad therapy and then from a number of angles, but it turns out, that rash of family alienation we're seeing, young people cutting off their parents,
right,
it's mostly young people who were very coddled by their parents. It's mostly not people who were dealt with harshly by their parents, because
right,
actually what kids need, and this is very good research, it's been replicated hundreds of times, what kids need is rules. They need
right,
authority and they need to be held to account if they break the rules.
right,
And we've known this, we stopped doing it, and part of the reason we stopped doing it is we shamed parents out of it. We turned them into what's called caregivers. We gave them a
mm,
huge demotion, and their job essentially became one of, it used to be giving them the
right,
kids their
right,
values. No, the school's going to supply
mm,
those, right? What did the parent role become? Shuttling them from one expert to
right,
another. It's a very degraded role. And by the way, parents don't enjoy it as much either.
right. Yeah. I mean, I would. I mean, I'm a parent of two small kids, and I would feel sort of territorial, right? You just said like, oh, the school will give them their values. I just thought, not in my house,
Right.
right? I mean, it's just
And that's why kids from conservative families do better in
right,
mental health,
right.
because conservatives were more skeptical of the messages from the progressive left coming in through the schools. They were much more skeptical, and liberal parents were much less skeptical and much more willing to let the school supply some of the
Right.
values, not realizing what kind of values were coming in through the schools.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it too is this idea that, like, I mean, I often hear, parents talk, especially with older parents who have older girls. They'll say like, "Oh, my daughter's my best friend," and it's like, I don't know, it never sits quite well with me, right? Because that's a different relationship than the one I think you're supposed to have with your parent. I heard someone, I wish I could remember who, it might have even been you, recently say something that just I thought got it perfectly right. You can be either friends with your kids when they're children or friends with them when they're adults, but you can't do both.
I love that. I did not say that, but I love it. And
I
I
was
think
like,
that's exactly right. That's absolutely right. Kids need authority. The time to give them the rules,
right,
to time to teach them right from wrong is
right,
when they're young. And I often deal with parents who kind of say, "Look, these are my beliefs, but I didn't want to push that
right,
on my kids." And I always say, "But your kid's teacher has no problem pushing her values on your
right,
kid.
right,
So now your teacher's supplying the values and you're sheepish about it. Who's
right,
going to win?"
exactly.
And that's the problem. That's why we have a generation crying for socialism. That's at least one piece of it. And that is we let the schools supply the values
Right.
when it should have come from us.
One of the values that the schools have supplied in our society is this sort of anti-risk taking disposition where, anything that's deemed dangerous is now taboo, right? Like letting your kid go to the store by themselves. I remember, I grew up in Brooklyn, New York in the 80s and 90s. When I was like 7 or 8 years old, my mom would hand me a $5 bill and say, go to the corner store, get milk and,
Right.
eggs or whatever. And I would go by myself. in 1990s New York, which is significantly more
Right.
dangerous than where we live, than the milieu we live in today. And yet, if I did that with my child, if I said, here's $5, go walk a few blocks to the store and come back, I would probably get a knock at the door from the police.
Right. So the experts, no doubt, made this much harder. The local laws about the kids being unable to be alone ever or walk by
Right.
themselves made it much harder. But there's something else too. Parents became frantic, and they became frantic not for foolish reasons.
Mm,
Once they saw the civilization in decline, they
right.
started watching things look worse than when they were young. It's very scary as a parent to go through that,
Yeah.
to realizing the city around you is getting scarier,
Mm,
that there are more homeless people, that
right.
there is more people violating the laws, that you can't rely on police to pick this person up. And if they do pick this person up, they're just going to be let go.
That's right.
And that made parents absolutely frantic and tried to stamp out risk taking in their kids.
Yeah.
And largely understandably, I know we beat up parents and say, oh, they're all helicoptering. But
Right.
the truth is, when you can trust the society around you to behave rationally and reasonably,
Right.
you're all of a sudden you're a lot braver of a parent.
Right.
And when you can't, when there are homeless encampments all around,
Right.
as there are in LA,
Right.
and I know and I know there's a huge problem here in New York. When you
Yeah.
have those problems, it's much harder to be a parent who is
Right. Right. Well, I think
allowing an independence.
it's hard to begin with, right? I mean, I was at the playground the other day with my kids and my daughter, who's 4 now. She just turned 4. There's this sort of metal ribbon thing, but it's like a climbing wall, and it goes up and then comes down, but it gets up there pretty high, and so she starts climbing it, and I'm watching her, and she's getting near the top, and I'm getting more and more nervous as she gets to the top, and as she starts to try and work her way down, you can see she's like confused, and she's, sort of getting anxious and worried. She doesn't know where to quite put her feet. And all I want to do is run up there and grab her off and,
Right.
and pull her down. And, my wife started to, and I said, no, like, I've read things. We have to let her work this out. We can stand here and catch her if she falls, but like, let her do it. And she did it.
Wow.
And it was like, it was hard. I had to make a
It's
conscious effort to push through just that, which is pretty minimal risk, right? If she
I
falls, it's on mulch. She probably.
It's hard. I remember my one of my son's first piano recitals. He was 4,
Mm,
and it was a very, very simple piece, as you can imagine, because he
sure.
was only 4. But he started to get nervous before he was going to go on, and I started to panic a little and think, oh God, if this goes badly, he's going to quit piano. He's never going to
Right.
want to do this again. I don't
Right.
want this to leave it. And my husband just said to me, let him be.
Yeah.
And he got up there, and it shocked us all. He announced himself, he announced his piece, and I didn't think he could do it. I didn't know.
Right.
And in that moment, he could do it.
Right.
He decided that.
Right.
And that became like, to him, he identified as someone who could do those
Right.
things.
Right.
I mean, he made it true.
There's a
And
there's a
yeah,
there's a risk you take that you rob them
right,
of those experiences that actually give them confidence in the
right.
future, right? I mean, it's a hard thing to do as a
It's
parent
hard.
because you want to save your kid, but
And no one around you is doing it either.
right.
So it's very scary because you think, oh God, I'm going to be the parent when
Right.
something happens, and everyone's going to say, well, she's the idiot, or let her walk home from the bus stop alone, which I
Right.
did. But, you know, this is what I'll say. It's not that I'm not afraid of those things.
Yeah.
I'm also afraid of the alternative.
Right. Right.
And the alternative is a young person who can't do for themselves. And now they're 12, 13, 15, and they're
Right.
childlike and they're tied to you. It's very hard to get that kid out of the house,
Right.
because if they've never done it, you let I used to say this, but it's, I said this in the book, and it's true. When my 10-year-old wanted to walk home by herself,
Right.
I let her. She was proud of herself
Right. Yeah. I
when
remember
she
the first
came
time I
home.
walked
Right.
to school by myself.
Right. And she was proud when she came
Yeah.
in the door. If I had waited till maybe she started at 9.
Right.
If I had waited till she was 13, every 13-year-old knows there's no great pride in that.
Right.
So they don't have the impetus.
Right.
And when I would interview parents, what I learned was, if you didn't let kids do things they can do
Right.
in their window of, eagerness to try,
Right.
they stop wanting to.
Right. Right. No, it's so important. I think you framed it exactly the right way. It's not that there aren't risks. It's that there are also risks associated with minimizing the risk of the thing that you're
Yeah,
afraid of, right?
right.
It's a double-edged sword. I mean, one of the things that I'm worried about as a parent, in particular as a parent of a girl, um, is the risk posed by social media. I have been reading nonstop about all these adolescent girls who seem to be suffering from various kinds of mental health problems that are tied in some way to the ubiquity of social media, right? People are just addicted to the dopamine hits that they get from scrolling. They are addicted to the feedback and define themselves by the feedback of their posts, right? They're posting these selfies that, and if they don't get a certain number of likes, it's like, someone told them that they were a bad person and, they sort of curl up in a ball. That can't be healthy.
No, and it's not a risk we were really evolved to handle.
Yeah.
That is so outside. That's not walking home from school, which
Right.
we know we can do. We
Right.
did it when we were kids.
Right.
Nobody is prepared for the 1 million viral tweet or
Right.
the 1 million person, or even 1,000 kids making fun of you.
Right.
Nobody is ready for that.
Yeah.
And in fact, we didn't evolve to handle that. We had 15 kids making fun of us.
Right. Yeah.
And nobody was taking pictures of it.
And they had to do it in person
And
and
they
risk
had to
getting
do it in
smacked.
person. Right. So it was a growing experience.
Right.
So I don't think there's anything healthy about social media. My kids aren't on it. I think that really is a very unhealthy, and it really is. Look, we're seeing the effects of social media in all kinds of ways.
Yeah.
But one of the ways is the ability to herd young people
Hmm.
and feed them, propagandize to them
Right.
writ large. We've never had a mechanism for this.
Yeah.
I mean, to put messages, beam them directly into the heads of tweens and teens.
Right.
That's a very dangerous thing because a lot of people beaming these messages are very bad people.
Yeah. No, I think that's a massive, massive problem. One of the other risks that I see is, I even see this with some adults, is they sort of define and measure their own success up against the sort of curated feeds on their social media platforms. It's like, well, my life can't be good. Look at so and so. They're constantly on vacation or in the gym or posting these glamorous selfies where they look perfect. And it's like, hey, they're using filters. They're taking 10. Yeah, I was I go to a nice gym and there's a sort of very wide range of people who go, but there's a subset of the gym going population where I work out that's like constituted by these young, early 20s, girls who are constantly taking glam shots. They have tripods set up. And I watched this one girl take, it must have been 75 different versions of the same selfie before posting it
Wow.
between sets. Like, just it was like almost like OCD. It was like compulsory behavior. You could tell like it was unhealthy in that moment. It's like, I feel like more people need to understand that what they see is what people want them to see. It's a very small slice of their actual life, right? They don't always look like that. They don't have a filter. They don't have the ability to doctor the image in person. They're not always on vacation in Aruba or, in some VIP section at a nightclub or whatever. Like they're taking these posts, sometimes from a year ago and posting them as if it's today to give people the impression that they're living this glamorous life. And it makes your life feel substandard by comparison.
I don't think there's any doubt at this point that the social media companies have made young people's lives worse.
Yeah. Yeah.
And certainly children's lives worse. And one of the biggest harms is that they're not really enjoying their lives anymore.
Right.
They're not really present in them.
Right.
And, going to the gym used to be a lot of things. It was a chance to meet someone.
Right.
It was a chance to, think about your life. I mean, you start to work out and your brain very often goes somewhere else.
Yeah.
And you work through a problem that you can't figure out,
Right.
and you find this calm too. I mean, that's one of the great things about exercise. You can chew on something and chew over something and then all of a sudden you realize the answer or what you wanted to say or what you need to do. And they're not letting themselves get to that point.
Right. Yeah, I think that's right. This is fascinating conversation, by the way. I'm really enjoying it. I wish we could go on for another hour. But when I think about some of the problems that we've talked about, I think about social media. I think about the sort of over medicalization of our lives. This kind of over reliance on therapy and SSRIs and Ritalin and all these other things. And my instinct as a policy person is to ask, well, what do we do? What's the solution, right? These are problems. there's got to be a fix. And I've come around more and more over the years to the idea that there are actually some problems that, are not particularly susceptible to policy interventions. And I wonder if the problems that you've covered as a journalist kind of fall into that, or do you think that there are some sort of concrete policy levers that we could pull to make things better?
Right. So that's a great question. Some of the things we're already seeing great policy interventions,
Yeah.
right? Certainly with the trans,
Yeah.
you know, identification issue among teens, we've gone a long way
Yeah.
to reversing a really, really bad trend.
Yes.
Lawsuits obviously made a big, difference in that too. The journalism made a big difference, but the policy really matters.
Yeah.
And for instance, not having, no longer forcing mental health professionals to affirm,
Right.
which they were compelled to do.
Right.
That's an important reversal. So some of these things can be susceptible to important policy intervention, but I would say that a lot of the problems with young people in the last, generation are problems we introduced.
Yeah.
We need to do less of that. Okay. Gender ideology was not something sixth graders were
Right.
gravitating
Right.
toward, not until we pushed it through every school.
Right.
So we need to stop doing that. And the same thing with therapy and with medication and diagnosis of young people. We brought in mental health professionals, and lo and behold, they found diagnosis everywhere they went. We need to stop introducing harms into the lives of kids.
I think that's a great place to start. I do. And a great place to end this lovely conversation. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
doing the show, Abigail. And thank you all for listening and watching. Please do not forget to like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, do all the things for the algorithm. Let us know what you thought of this episode and the others. And we will bring you a new one next week. So until then, you've been listening to the City Journal podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was great.